So I'm looking at Little Erin Merryweather in this video, which is a slasher film that was, I believe, shot in around about 2003, but it was actually a few years later before it saw release. I think it was about 2007, so there was a bit of a delay in getting it released. The story for this one is that it takes place in a small town in New England and is centred around some murders of male students at a local college. The first victim is lured away into a patch of forest land and dispatched by a red-robed figure, and his body is later found with a stomach cavity torn open and rocks placed inside. This baffles the local police, and we've got a young man that works for the school paper called Peter, who tries to investigate this himself after he sees that the police aren't doing a very good job. And he's aided in this by his one of his professors, who kind of has a background in criminal profiling and psychology. And basically the film follows him trying to uncover the mystery surrounding these deaths that keep occurring throughout the film of fellow male students. And as it goes on, Peter begins to realise that the killer is inspired by fairy tales, indeed by Little Red Riding Hood, and is most likely someone that is perhaps living on the campus that he already knows. So it's just kind of like a bit of a mystery element to it. So going to the good points now, and it looks really nice with great cinematography in places, nice visual touches, including the flash of red of the killer's robe that we see against the snowy backdrop, kind of a stark contrast. And there's also some nice coloured illustration type drawings that help narrate the story at times, and these are really well done and they're quite pleasing to the eye, in particular when they kind of morph into the real life locations before our eyes, so that's nicely done. And other positive thing is that it does set itself apart from most slasher films, with the victims all being male, which is quite rare. And it's not really a spoiler for me to say that the killer is a female. It's revealed pretty much near the start, so that's not really a spoiler. If you've watched the trailer, you'll know who the killer is anyway. And she's a female, so we've got some male victims and a female killer, which is quite a rarity. And indeed, we've got a final boy in Peter as opposed to a final girl, so it kind of really goes against the grain there. Next good thing is that there's a really good atmosphere that the film creates throughout. The campus, the college campus, might seem like a very stereotypical kind of location for these sort of films, but it actually is a bit different than most, and it's kind of got more of a subdued, desolate theme to it. It's kind of a more creepy atmosphere, that kind of leans to more of a creepy atmosphere. Normally in these kind of films you see like kind of lots of like exuberant party-going kids in these kind of campuses, but in this one it's a bit more, like I say, subdued, and it kind of creates a more creepy atmosphere. Also the storybook type narration that I've mentioned previously with the kind of illustrations adds to the creepiness and the atmosphere, as does the doll, which we often see in these scenes that is quite important to the killer. Lastly, for the positives, there's the killer, Erin, is much more complex than most that we see in these kind of films. She does come across as quite shy and even endearing at times in interactions with Peter before he realises that she is the murderer. And yeah, so she's got a bit more going on than some of the killers do. She's certainly not one-dimensional. Although Peter himself is a bit flat, his teacher, Dr. Sheffield, the one that has got the background in psychology and such, is quite a likeable character herself as well, that leaves us wanting to see her more, perhaps see more of her perhaps than we do. So that's always a good thing, I guess, when a film can do that. I would like to have seen her have a slightly bigger role. But Peter's okay though himself. He's not a bad character, but he's actually interestingly played by the director, I believe. So I guess he's not a proper actor anyway. He's more of a behind the camera kind of guy normally, I guess. So we'll go on to the bad points now, and it goes for kind of subtle, less is more approach when it comes to the blood and gore, but I think it takes it a bit too far, to the point when they don't really give us any blood whatsoever. So it's a bit disappointing in that regard. I mean, that is kind of a lot of the fun when it comes to watching slashers, is kind of seeing some interesting deaths with a lot of gore effects, and I can appreciate the more subtle approach that we see in films like Halloween, and I know it's not a slasher, but the Blair Witch Project didn't use a lot of gore, but still even show the threat very much, and it was still really good. So it can work, but in this case I think it kind of lets it down a little bit, and it kind of takes the fun out of things. So it could have been maybe a bit more fun to watch if they put a little bit more blood in it, because what they do give us is pretty much nothing. So a little bit disappointing in that regard, but at least I thought so. Okay, moving on to the next one, and it's a bit light on Erin's backstory. We don't really learn as much as I would have liked about her childhood or her relationship with her father, which is what's kind of set her off on her path to becoming a killer. But he didn't really go into a lot of detail with that. We're kind of like left with a few unanswered questions, like how did the father get found out? He was kind of like an incestuous relationship going on between him and Erin, obviously against her will. But we didn't really learn an awful lot about that, or what his motivation was, what kind of led to him getting found out, but how long he was in prison, that kind of thing. If the town knew about it, if it was a big scandal at the time, that kind of thing. It wasn't really elaborated on very much. Also, the Dr. Sheffield character, her past wasn't really fleshed out very much either. It was kind of alluded to that she had some sort of a background, perhaps working in the police force or in some kind of criminal profiling capacity, perhaps in a big city, before she came to the college campus job, but it wasn't really developed further. It would only have taken a minute or so to have explained that in more depth, but they just didn't go into detail, so we're left hanging a bit there as to her background. That's only a small thing. Lastly, it was a bit unrealistic, I thought, that no one suspected Erin sooner. In particular, Peter, who was kind of like a wannabe journalist, so you'd think he would have been a bit more on the ball when it came to spotting the signs. I know you could say that yes, he had a crush on her, so a crush on Erin, that is, so he didn't want to believe anything bad of her, but it just kind of seemed a bit stupid that he didn't kind of realise what was right in front of his nose. I mean, even the red cloak that she wore in itself should have been like a sign that she was the killer, seeing that once they worked out the fairy tale aspect of things, and that had been established, it should have been an obvious sign just that she was wearing that all the time, that she was perhaps involved with it. And she even mentions it to him at one point that she lives with her grandmother, which again would have tied in with the Little Red Riding Hood thing, but he didn't seem to twig even at that point. So, you know, it made it seem a bit stupid, and like it just seemed a bit unrealistic in general that no one would suspect her when she was kind of like a loner type as well. But I guess if that would have hindered the story if they'd have guessed sooner, obviously. But it just left me feeling a bit unsatisfied. It was a bit unrealistic, but. Anyway, overall though, going on to kind of my verdict now, there is much to admire in the film, in particular in regards to how the visual style of it looks. It does look really good. The fairy tale elements kind of mix in well with the modern college campus setting, and it's refreshing as well to see things kind of turned on their head with the killer being a female and the victim's male, the final boy that we don't get to see very often. We have seen it on the odd occasion, like in The Burning, but generally speaking, it's pretty rare. There is no mystery though surrounding the killer. Like I said, it's pretty much revealed from the off who it is, which was a bit of a disappointment to me. I know we've had this in other films as well, like obviously in say Halloween, we know that Michael Myers is the killer straight from the beginning, but no one complains about that. But usually if the killer turns out to be someone that's kind of like a normal person, then there's a bit more guesswork involved leading up to the discovery of who he is. But in this case, they didn't do that. It was just like a normal person, but they told us straight away. So it did kind of leave things a bit empty in that regard. I know they could have built up suspense more if they kind of had us guessing who it was, at least a little bit for like perhaps the first half an hour before they revealed who it was. But that's just a matter of opinion really. It's not a major problem, it's just something that I thought I'd mention that kind of hindered it for me a little bit, but not enough to mention it as a proper bad point. But anyway, also the lack of blood though, that was a bit of a nuisance. I didn't really like that. It would have been more fun with a bit more gore, but overall though it was enjoyable, and it's an often overlooked film, I would say, although it does perhaps have a tendency to be overrated by those that have seen it. But having said that, it's still well worth a look if you've not seen it, so I definitely recommend it. Seek it out if you can. In terms of the extras, I don't believe there are any. As you can see there, perhaps you can't see, but there's no extras on this particular DVD release as far as I know. I don't think so. So that's that. We'll go on to my verdict then, my star rating I should say. I'm going to give it 4 stars, which is maybe marginally high. I was thinking of 3, but in the end I decided to give it 4, which is kind of the equivalent, if you think of it as a score out of 10, I kind of think as 4 as being either a 7 or 8, so I'll probably give it a 7 out of 10, so you know, it's kind of like a low 4 for the star rating, so a low 4, just about scrapes the 4. Okay, thanks for watching. If you're interested in checking out any of my other reviews, check out my website, the slasherspotlight.co.uk. There'll be lots more written reviews on there. It's early days, but I'm trying to add them every week. And if you want to check out the body count for this, check the description, but obviously that will contain major spoilers. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye.